afternoon. I'm Jim Eskin on behalf of Eskin Fundraising Training. It's a privilege and pleasure to welcome you to our 88th webinar in our nonprofit empowerment series. Yeah, that time goes by when you're having fun. Our guest expert is a good friend and a good member of our learning community. If with me and Don have made a deal, the question's easy, I'm going to take it. If it's challenging, he's going to take it. I think it was about 4 years ago I first met Don Gleason. I used to do live workshops at the Microsoft store in La Cantera, and he participated in those workshops and contributed. And since then, we've got to know each other much more. He's participated in these webinars, and I'm just thrilled to have him as a subject matter expert. I think everybody I know wishes they had more time. And guess what? I don't care if you're Elon Musk or you're Jim Eskin or Don Gleason, you get 7 days, 24 hours in each day. That's it. We all get the same. And so we all want to know how to make the best use of time. And I wanted to turn to the guy. It's hard to describe Don. He has been between the military and the private sector, an executive leadership coach. Moving on, you wouldn't tell he's that old, almost 4 decades now. And I met him. He's also been a significant leader in our community. And right now he serves as president of an organization that I have been marveled at called the Military Transition Roundtable. So Don, how about, first of all, welcome. How is the Gleason family doing? Okay.
Oh, we're doing really, really well. Grandkids are growing, the kids are growing, they're out on their own, they're prospering and building relationships. And my wife and I,
good, and they can take care of their parents, right?
That's right. It's the start of camping season. So my wife and I are getting out in the camper once a month, and we've got a big trip planned here in a couple of weeks out to Arizona.
Wow.
So we're excited. It's going to see some new birds. My wife loves bird watching.
While you're home. So before we get on to today's subject, time management, you are doing such exciting things at the Military Transition Roundtable. Can you take a few minutes and tell us about the Military Transition Roundtable?
Oh, you betcha. And I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks again, Jim, for letting me be here today and to talk about time management. I work a lot with C-suite leaders, and we'll come back to some of those and some examples. But to be here, and Jim has helped us a lot in our efforts on fundraising. He's been a coach for us as we've talked through a lot of things. So Military Transition Roundtable is focusing in on helping military in their transition out of the service. You know, we're still losing 22 military and veterans a day to suicide. And on
God, did you repeat that again?
You bet. 22 military and veterans a day to suicide. And that's way too many, right? So on average, the military and veteran population are 2 to 1 times as prone to commit suicide. During career transition, that rises to 4 to 1. Four times as likely to commit suicide. And it really comes down to they've never had to really do transition during their life. They took a test, an assessment, the ASVAB, Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery. They got put in a job, unless they were a doctor, a lawyer, a nurse, an engineer like I was, who came in as what we wanted. Otherwise, the military just put you in a job. And when there was too many people in your career field, they said, you can opt to one of these 3. You're changing, but you can opt to one of these 3. And it may or may not be in accordance with the ASVAB in terms of your skills. But the military just saluted, they did it. But they didn't have to do a resume. They didn't have to do an elevator pitch. They didn't interview for jobs. They just got reassigned base to base. And they never really had the opportunity to look at the values and the culture of a base and say, yeah, I want to go there. Or, no, I don't want to go there. But now that they come into transition, all the things that we have trained them to do in the military kind of comes back to haunt them a little bit. You know, there's an ego that we've created in the military that you can do anything. And yes, you're a part of a team, but there's not really a mindset to ask for help. And when you're going through transition and you've never done something before, not asking for help is a big, what's the right word? It's a big liability.
Hey, as
There
a
you go.
fundraiser, that's all I've done my whole life is ask for help.
Yeah, right. So as soon as we get over that, things start going better. So one thing that we do in Military Transition Roundtable is we're different than the others. Most programs spend a half a day to 5 days downloading tons of information to the military members. They're getting ready to transition, how to write a resume, how to write an elevator pitch, how to do interviews, how to network, how to dress for success. And all that is good, but it's overwhelming. So what we do is we brought the mastermind concept, since we call it the roundtable, of 8 to 10 people together,
Hmm.
and we meet for an hour
Huh.
every other week for 6 months. And it's the team of people getting to know each other and helping each other.
Can I ask you on
Bring
a butt
issues.
in, but are the
Sure.
people with different ages and different backgrounds, or what's a cohort look like?
So every cohort has no limitations. So it could be from the 24, 26-year-old up to the 50-year-old. It could be airmen to colonel, soldiers to
Hmm.
colonels. It could be any service, any of the 5. It could be any career field. Because once you leave the service and join that company, there's no distinguishing anymore. I
Yeah.
have seen captains who would make a better director or vice president than some of the colonels.
Hmm.
And sometimes the colonels don't want that responsibility anymore, but the young captain does, right? So it's really kind of now what you want to do. So the cohorts are really doing well. And what's great, Matt Shearer, my partner, and I, the less we talk, the more the group talks and shares and gives ideas and really works together, and they connect in the chat, and they're connecting on LinkedIn, and they're setting up meetings to talk to each other. That's exactly what we want. We
Hmm.
want them to all the time be helping each other through the 6 months. And
Hmm.
here's the big metric that I really like to tout. And that is, on average, according to the University of Syracuse, their Veterans and Military Family Center, they found back in 2015 that on average, military leave their first post-military job within 12 months at the rate of 45%. Some studies say it's closer to 60, 65%.
Hmm.
So far, we've had 40 that meet that criteria out of our 78 alumni to date, and we've only been in place for 2.5 years. Half of them, roughly about 40, have been out for 12 months, and they're leaving at a rate of 22%. So 45 to 22.
Wow.
Half.
Congratulations.
Thanks. And that's
Hey,
pretty significant.
can you
So
do a favor? In
Mhm.
our audience, we have a lot of volunteer and professional nonprofit leaders. All of them, they do different missions, but they all share in common something that touches, improves, and saves more lives. And certainly, this being Military City, USA, the Military Transition Roundtable is a significant player in our nonprofit circle.
Mhm.
And so, can you express our appreciation to your fellow board member and your staff and your volunteers? Because, if any city needs help helping military
Mhm.
transition, it's San Antonio.
Yeah. Are you thinking kind of by name? Is that what you're thinking? Appreciation.
Okay, let's talk time management.
Okay.
First of all,
Well,
you
first
must hear it a million times, okay? Time management. So I like starting from the basics. How do you define time management?
well, that's always an interesting thing, right? Because as you said it so well right up front. There's 24 hours a day and there's 7 days a week,
For all of
365
us,
days
for
for all
all
of
of
us.
us.
So you can't manage time in terms of getting more, right? All you can do is manage what you put into that time.
Hmm.
So time management is kind of a misnomer. I use priority management, but
Yeah.
time management is the one that's really out there on Google. And time management or priority management, and I'll probably go back to that more often, is really about scheduling the right actions into your daily schedule so
Hmm.
that you can, and staying on task to get those things done. Too often what happens, and this is interesting as I work with C-suite and the next level down clients, when I start talking about priorities, they struggle a little bit. They might get 1 or 2, they're thinking number 3, I think they're guessing sometimes at number 4. And then I say, so talk to me about how you put that in your schedule. This last week, tell me how much time you put into each one of those. And it's not uncommon to say, well, I have a bunch on number 1 and some in number 2, but I haven't done number 4 in months. I said, so what's happening? And he said, I just never thought about that connection. So what's happening is they're not getting their priorities done because their time is getting filled. I think Dave Ramsey or some of the other personal growth leaders
Mhm.
talk, if you don't purposely fill up your calendar, somebody else will fill up your calendar for you.
Uh-huh.
So intentional living. John Maxwell wrote a book called Intentional Living, and I'm a John Maxwell certified speaker, trainer, and coach, the
Mhm.
Maxwell leadership team. And he talks that success is found in your daily calendar. And if you're not intentionally living, intentionally filling that calendar every day, others will fill it and you will not be able to achieve what you're trying to get to.
Yeah,
So success is found in your daily calendar. And I think that's really priority management.
that's a great answer. And by the way, again, to the audience, at any time, if a comment or a question that I raise needs clarification, just let us know through the chat box. We'll redirect our attention to you. But I want to start. Do you think punctual people are born or made?
Oh, definitely made, without a doubt. And I think that I can give you a story about me. I think before I say that, people are born a certain type of personality. I'm a DISC certified DISC consultant, and there's a number of different personality assessments, behavior assessments out there. So I happen to use DISC, and C-wired people are very compliant to procedures or even to people's expectations. I know as I grew up, when the boss said, "Hey, I need you to do this," man, I was focused in
Uh-huh.
on it.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, yes, sir. So it means really behavior. So have you ever heard the piece that culture eats strategy for lunch?
What was that again?
Culture eats strategy for lunch.
Ah,
It doesn't
no, I
matter
haven't.
always. It doesn't matter what the organization says, the leaders say. It's the behavior of the organization that what people will follow and what's going to happen. So when we talk about being punctual, the leadership can say all day long, "I want you to be here 5 minutes early or on time." But if the leadership is showing up 5 minutes late and they're allowing everybody else to show up 5 minutes late, it doesn't matter what they say. It matters what they do. More is
Hmm.
caught than taught, as I've heard a number of people say. So I know when I went to officer training school, my wife would tell you the last thing that Don Gleason was punctual and
Really?
disciplined. Oh yeah, just terrible.
Now, do we thank your wife or the military for changing that?
Yes. There was a lot
Good
there was
answer.
a there was a lot of pressure from my wife to become a time manager and to be disciplined because her father, an Air National Guard tech sergeant, was very punctual. That was the environment he grew up in. And his dad was owned his own construction business in Madison, Wisconsin, and he had to be on time to make things happen. So there was a lot of pressure for me, but when I joined the service, I really had to decide right then, are you going to do this or are you not? And I had decided at that point that I may not be good enough for the military, but they weren't going to kick me out. I was going to do everything possible. And part of that was learning to be a time manager.
Hmm.
So it was kind of interesting. I'll,
I
I'll
got to
save that.
tell
I'll
you,
save that story.
I got to tell you why I'm scared of time management.
Hmm.
I have this vision. I get up in the beginning of the day, I make a list. An hour later, I check on my list. At the midday, I check on my list. I spend more time watching a list than actually doing my job. That's my probably a misconception. That's why I was scared of time management.
Sure. And that is a potential. And I think it goes back to the DISC personality, right? C personalities are very compliant. They love lists. They love to write things down. They love to comply with that during the day. I wired people, very influential, good talkers, good storytellers. They may make a list, but they never follow it. It's just not part of them. So how you walk through this is really kind of person dependent and personality dependent. But I think, there's a couple different things when you think about, is it good to have things written down and try to
Yeah.
follow them? And I'll give you 3 quotes.
Okay.
What gets measured gets done.
Yeah.
I think we've heard that in almost every business. If you're
Yeah.
not going to talk about it and measure it and see how you're working through it, you're never going to achieve the things that you want to achieve. Could be a simple list, It could be a complex spreadsheet. I was working with a couple in Knoxville, Tennessee, and they were working a budget. And she came up with a very rudimentary general budget, kind of just big picture stuff. He was an engineer. He's an engineer. And his just an incredibly complex spreadsheet. I couldn't understand it. And they couldn't communicate. So they had to figure out how to, at what level are they going to create a budget and come together. And that's where two personalities had to work that. I think the next quote is, you can't out-exercise a bad diet, right? If you're going to eat and eat everything in sight, we were talking earlier about going to lunch and how do you maintain it in the waistline, especially the last couple of years. I mean, it's sometimes tough to go to the gym, etc. And if you can't exercise enough to overcome that bad diet. So I think it's the same thing when you come to time management, priority management. If you're not going to put it down and put the priorities on a piece of paper and walk through and make sure you're getting those things done, then it doesn't matter how many hours you work, you're not going to get the priority stuff done. So I think it's
okay. Let's dig in a little deeper. What are the steps of adopting not a time but a priority management discipline? And more to the point, how do you change someone? Say Jim Eskin was not punctual at all. How do you change someone to talk the talk and walk the talk in owning priority management?
Yeah, I think the first thing is you have to want to do it. When you talk about change, you can't change people. You know, even when we went to officer training school or others went to basic training, the people that got kicked out were the ones that said, I am what I am and you can't change me and I'm not going to change.
And that person is probably not going to become a leader, right?
That's correct. So they got bumped out. So the people that were willing to change and adapt to the military style, or even really every company, you have to adapt to their style. General Ayala, he's Marine Corps Major General, works with the city in the military transition of military veterans. He says that, remember, we, the military, joined the civilian company. They didn't join us. So we have to comply to their piece. So you have to want to change. That was a story I was going to say a minute ago. When I went to officer training school, the first weekend, we went and got our uniforms. And instead of getting 2 pair of permanent press fatigues, they gave me 4 pair of cotton fatigues. Because I'm 6'5", bigger than most people. They had extras. Guess what? Don got a deal. I walked out like, hey, I got 4 instead of 2. Well, then I spent an hour a day having to iron those suckers and starch them every day. And I remember 9 o'clock, I went to my flight commander in the classroom. He looked at me and said, did you even iron this thing? Because it just, in the heat and humidity of the fall of Texas, it just fell apart. So I had to want to change to be able to stay in the service. As I said earlier, they may kick me out, but I wasn't going to give them a reason. So I had to change and make sure that I was doing it right. So I think first thing is you want to make sure that you want to change. And I think setting up the process, the basics pieces, is first knowing what you want to achieve. If you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. Think back to Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah.
Right? She drops through the hole. She talks to the Cheshire Cat at the fork in the road. Which way do I go? And he says, well, it depends on where you want to go. And she says, I don't rightly know. And he says, well, then either path will get you there. Right. I love that quote. So you got to figure out where you're at and where you want to be. What I use a lot of times is the wheel of life. And
hey, talk a little about the difference of priority management if you work for yourself, your own boss, or you're one of the many, many people who has a supervisor. So talk about priority management if you're your own boss or you have maybe one or several bosses.
Okay. I think the process is really the same. The hard part is, as an entrepreneur, you don't have anybody to give those tasks to, like you do as if you're an employee in a company, right? You can sometimes delegate up, delegate over, delegate down. You can work some of that piece. There's the Eisenhower matrix, they call it, which is the urgent, not urgent, important, not important. And there's boxes there where if these things aren't urgent and aren't important, they don't deserve to be done. They should be deleted. But if they're, I always have to look to make sure if they're urgent but not important, then you shouldn't be doing them. somebody else to do them and you delegate them. So you focus your time on really, truly what's important to you. And if we go back to that basics a second, right? Know your priorities, set a goal to get to
Mhm.
that priority, take action steps to achieve that,
Yeah.
develop action steps to get there, and then schedule those actions into your daily schedule.
Let
If
me
you're not,
dig a
if you're
little
not doing
deeper
that,
here.
mhm,
How does an employee and their supervisor set stretch but realistic priorities, say for a day or for a week?
how does an employee set them?
No, how does an employee work with their supervisor to set priorities for, say, a day or a week or a longer period that are both stretch, but they're realistic?
Yeah, I think well, the first thing every leader has to be, um, I was going to use the word managing. Every leader leads their people, each person differently, because each person has different capabilities and different skills and different tendencies, different passions, right? So the leader, first of all, and this is leadership 101, you need to
Mhm.
get to know your people.
Yeah.
What Don Gleason can do and what John Smith can do in a day or a week are probably different. So the goals I'm going to set are going to be different. And you just have to kind of realize that. If you try to hold them to the same thing, you're setting up one of them for failure. Um, once you know what they can do, is looking at that schedule that they have with all the different priorities and see what's reasonable to be able to get done within that time frame.
Yeah.
Too often, I've seen a lot of leaders just think, well, this is the only thing you have going on. I'm the most important thing. So all of your time is placed on this. But they forget that a lot of times within a company, within an organization, you have a number of competing priorities. So you have to consider that so that you set them up for success and not for failure.
What do you think of people will say, I'm available 24/7 through my smart devices? What do you think? I hear that a lot. What do you think of that?
It's a misnomer. It's
Hmm?
unhealthy. It's unhealthy. Um, I think it's a fake. You really can't be. I've seen people do it for short periods, but you wear yourself out. I think two things
And
really
I'm
have.
wondering, how do you get your priorities done if,
Yeah,
if you're being dictated by every phone call or email that comes in, et cetera, et cetera?
yeah. I
So
remember
let me
doing that.
ask you, and all of us suffer from computer fatigue. What's
Mhm.
a sensible way to manage use of your smart devices?
Yeah, I think first of all is you have to set the expectation within yourself about how much you're going to be available for your boss. And that sounds a little funny, how much,
Mm,
because the boss is going to want certain pieces, right? But it becomes kind of a negotiation. If you have a job, like when I was a civil engineer squadron commander, I was the base fire marshal. I had to be available for power outages, all those kind of things. There was just an expectation I couldn't argue against, that I had to be available 24/7. I had to be the phone right next to me. I had to be able to respond and answer it and get out of the house in a few minutes to a situation. But if you're a consultant, right, there's probably not that expectation that a client's going to call you in the middle of the night,
yeah.
and you can have a little bit more room in your life and say, I'm not available. You call me at 8 o'clock the next morning. It's not a life or death situation.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of that expectation that has to happen right up front. When I was a mission support group commander in the military, and I had squadron commanders below me, I was very clear with them about being available 24/7. And I said, unless I call you and tell you I need this by a certain time, just assume that you can work it within your normal day. That if I send you something on Friday night, you can work it Monday morning. You don't have to come in on Saturday to try to work it.
Yeah.
So it was that expectation. And I tried to, here's a great one I heard this morning in a podcast, is when you send an email, in the subject line, put a date when you expect it back by. Maybe it's
That
a
gets
week or
into my
2
next
weeks.
question.
Mhm.
Okay. I mean, right perfectly. What's a reasonable time to set for responding to an email or a cell phone call?
Yeah, again, it goes all over the place, and I think you have to do it by that expectation conversation with you and your boss. There's going to be some bosses. I had a I had a wing commander when I was the group commander. He would come in at 3:30 and he'd wake up at 3:30 in the morning, and he'd send emails, and he expected a response
I
from you by 8 o'clock.
had, by the way, I had one of those bosses.
Yep, yep. And I've had other bosses who went to the gym the first thing in the morning, and they'd get in the office at 8 o'clock, and they
Mhm.
would work through sometime during the day, and it was usually within a day or so, to figure it out. And what we did is we had a conversation with, these type of things I need right away. These type of things can wait, work into the normal schedule. So we were able to have the communication about how do we do that. So I don't know that you can't just say 5 minutes or 7 days.
What do you think of the habit, particularly of email, has changed our lives so much? Of having a standard response email throughout the day, said your email is very important to me. I plan to get back to you with whatever you say within 48 or 72 hours. I have an automatic response like that.
I definitely agree with that when you're out of the office, right? If you're going to be on vacation, you're going to be on a travel, business travel, whatever, so that people know that you're not going to get anything for the next X number of days until you're back. If you're just not going to get 2 things during the day, then that's probably another good thing to do. But I kind of don't like it on a standard, just because
How come?
it sets the expectation that you're not being responsive.
Uh-huh.
It's like an excuse, right, for me not to
Yeah.
be fast. You're thinking about it from, hey, I'm trying to set a date of 24 to 72 hours.
And you
But
talked about priority management. Not every phone call, email, inquiry you get is equal in importance. Is that right?
that's right. There is a lot of email that does not warrant a response. I hate to say that, but
Yeah, I agree.
some of
I
it's just
agree.
information. Some of it is crazy ideas. Some of it's what if, and it depends who it's coming from and what the subject is and how it fits into your priorities.
How do you think time management, priority management has changed in the last couple of years? So many of us have been working from home and remotely. How do you think
Mhm.
priority management has changed because of that dynamic?
Oh, it's huge, huge. I think, I think you can see from when we were in the office, right, before cell phones. You and I remember those days, right?
You
Before
remember what a
computers.
phone ringing sounded like?
That's right, right? The rotary, right?
Yeah.
And when we got to the office, we got out of the car, we went into the office, we started workday. And at the end of the day, we packed up our briefcase, we went to the car, we went home. And that became the end of the workday. And there wasn't a cell phone to call. So that smartphone changed that, because
Mm,
now your boss could get at you at night. And it really warranted, like I said a minute ago, what is the expectation for me to be responding to you all night long? Do I need to check it just before I go to bed? And there's a
yeah.
lot of pieces when we talked about being available 24/7 as being unhealthy.
Yeah.
You know, you have to turn the blue screens off an hour or 2 before you go to bed, because there's things that are happening inside your brain with the blue light that it impacts your sleep. And if you don't do that, you'll you'll sleep less healthy. You won't sleep as deeply. And I noticed that I have a Fitbit watch, and
Yeah.
I can see how well I sleep at night, and I can tell, when I do that, don't have healthy sleep, and when I do. So I think that the smartphone started us down that process, but now when we went to remote work, it was too easy to go downstairs or go into the kitchen, have dinner, and come back to your office and keep on working. And I
Yeah.
think the key word that I want to talk about sometimes in some of these is boundaries.
Oh, you're making me mad. That's the next question I want to get to.
Okay.
Exactly. What are your recommendations on setting boundaries between the work component of your life and the non-work component of your life, be it family, civic, personal priorities?
Yeah, and I go back to I go back to that wheel of life we started talking about earlier. If you look at your life within certain areas, right? My spiritual side, my financial side, my
Yeah.
professional, my relationships, my, things like that. You kind of create, where am I now? Where do I want to be? What are the things I need to work to get from A to B to make it better? And how do I prioritize that? Because you can't prioritize everything as number one. When everything's number one, then nothing is number one.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you got to think through, what's most important. Is it my physical fitness? Is it the relationship? And what I like to do is even think 5 or 10 years down the road. My physical fitness goal is not to be 213 pounds. It's to have the physical strength and flexibility to be able to get down on the floor and play with my grandkids, to take them out and play frisbee golf, to go hiking and fishing and those type of things. So it's bigger than just a weight goal. Weight's just a small component. And I think to
Yeah.
do that in the different areas. So to be able to balance those across your work and your personal, start setting boundaries. If I say, as I work with military, they come out of the service and they say, I've missed too many kids' ball games, too many kids'
Yeah.
plays. I want
Yeah.
to be there for
And
those.
you never get those moments back.
So setting that expectation right up front, I want to be available for those. And when you set that mindset and you talk to your boss and say, I'm willing to come back from those if we have to and work something late at night. But from that time to this time on these days, I want to be available for my kids.
Hmm.
So again, it's that communication and expectations. There's so much of time management, priority management is setting the mindset, having communication with your boss, your peers, your subordinates about how we're going to manage these priorities, set the right boundaries so that we can achieve the goals that we want to achieve.
Yeah.
It's
These are
not just
wonderful. This is
it's
a
not simple.
wonderful discussion.
Yeah.
I'm going to bring up the M word. Okay. Don, the M word is meetings. What do you feel like if your life is dictated by meetings? From two perspectives. One, that say you're an employee, okay, and you're invited by supervisors, people higher up than you to these meetings. Or number two, you're a leader and you call people to your meetings. Everyone says the meetings are too long, they're too many, and they're out of control. How do you bring meetings under control if you're a leader or you're a employee?
Yeah. Our meeting management, think about prior to time management, right? Our meeting management is terrible in most companies, most businesses,
And
and the
by the
government.
way, I'm going to butt in, but I think with Zoom and video conferencing, many ways meetings have only escalated. They haven't gone away.
That's right. That's true. Because you can have a call on anything at any time, right? And you can reach people. So I think the very first thing that you got to do to manage your meetings right is there should never be a meeting without two things. One, and I say two things, but the first one has a number. There's got to be a clear agenda, a clear deliverable, and a timeline, right? We're going to meet for 1 hour. We're going to talk about this subject, and here's what we're going to do at the very end. And then we need a pacer to make sure that we're moving toward that and we're not getting off target. And if you don't have those things in place, then anybody can throw a subject in. You can run all over the place. 1 hour. When I was on a contract in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, the boss scheduled an hour. It always went 2 hours.
Yeah.
Always. But he would not schedule them for 2 hours. It was just a mindset thing. So you got to be clear on what that is. And I think the second one, like you talked about people being invited into the meeting, is you got to make sure you have the right people in the meeting.
Not everyone's got to be at the meeting, right?
Exactly where I was going to go. There are times to invite people to a meeting for their personal growth, to get the bigger picture, to see how the milk is made, right? How the hash is made. So that's valuable, but to have them in every meeting is really a waste of their time.
Yeah.
So you want to have the right people so that you can discuss that and get to the deliverable. You want to have, from a diversity perspective, make sure that you got the right people with different views. Could be any of the, sex, race, ethnicity. We could have all of those. You got to have that different view set.
Yeah.
But you don't need 10 of everyone, right? You don't. If you have 10% women, you don't need 70% of the room as women. Just to use an example.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes women can come up with better solutions than men can, and you just got to realize that they've got a different perspective. All those kind of things. So I'm not trying to be bad on women. It's just, that was just an example. But you want to have the right diversity, the right perspective. And I think it's one, having a clear meeting, clear expectation timeline, and the right people in the room, and not having people that don't need to be there. And I think the last thing I would tell you is make sure you use a parking lot.
Yeah.
If somebody
Talk about, I love the parking lot. Talk about that.
Yeah, if a topic comes up in a meeting that's not in the deliverable, it doesn't impact for that meeting, and put it in a parking lot, write it down on a whiteboard, write it on a piece of paper and say, we're going to have another meeting about that, but this meeting is about this, and we're going to stay on topic. And if you don't do that, you'll wander everywhere.
Okay, people in our learning community audience are nodding heads.
Mhm.
But what do? You work for a leader who is absolutely awful at managing, particularly the length of meetings. You know, you're a leader, the leader is the problem.
You know what I have done, and I've had that, is I've either tried to have a conversation with the boss about, things would be better if, or I found somebody who can influence the leader and say, hey, here's kind of the situation. Can we get information to the boss and say this would be better if? And we got to find the problem, the pain point for the boss. I remember when I first got to Germany, my first time, I was a captain, brand new captain. And we had a squadron staff meeting, and I was a flight chief, so it was all flight chiefs. And we met at 8 o'clock every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And they typically went 2 hours.
Hmm.
And I just couldn't figure out why we had to be there. But it was because 4 people were 95% of the meeting, and the rest of us were kind of strap hangers. Each meeting maybe had 5 or 10 minutes that I was really actively
Yeah,
participating in, listening, was involving me. And so it kind of goes back again to having the right people in the room, but also having that conversation with, I can do these other things if, but a lot of times the boss thinks about it from their perspective. I
yeah,
want you in the room in case an idea comes up so I don't have to go searching for you. And they don't think about it from the perspective of, how am I using that gentleman's time?
yeah,
Yeah. So I think it's just trying to, again, to have that conversation, and you got
yeah,
to figure out in different ways how you can get that message to the
yeah.
boss. I've had to figure that out.
Yeah, that's not an easy one. Hey, let's
No.
talk about working among peers, people at the same hierarchical level. And more, and particularly, I think in the last couple of years through video technology, we've been working in teams. Okay, you're working with peers. What are your suggestions on getting your peers? They don't report to you, okay? You don't report to them, but getting them to respect deadlines so you can get your priorities done.
Yeah. First thing is relationships. We've got to get away from the cell phone, get away from the laptop,
Yeah.
get away from the text messages, and pick up the phone or walk down the hallway and have conversations with people. You got to
Hey,
get
what's
to
that called? Conversation? I
conversations.
remember that word.
Yeah, the C word, right? You got to walk down and look in their office and see what sports team they root
Yeah,
for. What maybe there's a picture of a mountain they climbed. It's kind of like
yeah,
the picture I got behind me, right? Where did they go on a vacation? What is it that motivates them? And get
yeah,
to know them. That you go back to our mastermind, the Military Transition Roundtable. It's valuable because they've all gotten to know each other and they're
yeah,
working toward the same goal. So I think when you're talking about your peers, you've got to set the expectation as you're working together that you're all working toward the same goal as a team, and you get
yeah,
to know each other, and you get to be able to have conversations with each other. And if somebody walks in the office and says, hey, I want to talk to you about this, and it starts wandering off task, because you have the relationship, you can have the conversation and say, hey, I appreciate that you want to talk about that. Can we put that at lunch, or can we put it tomorrow, because I'm working on this?
yeah,
Here's the problem though. 67% of the population is S-wired under DISC. S's are very teamwork oriented, very collaborative. They're the heartbeat of an organization. Again, 67% are, but here's the problem. They resist conflict. They're uncomfortable with conflict.
yeah,
And that would be considered a conflict, where they're telling somebody, hey, I appreciate you want to talk about that, but I don't have time right now.
yeah,
I need to come back here. So what they'll do is here's the problem with it. They'll let them monopolize their time, waste their time, as you said, time waster. And they'll figure out, I'll just stay an extra hour at night and get my things done, or I'll take
yeah,
it home with me. But
yeah,
then what happens is you start sacrificing, remember the wheel of life.
yeah.
You start sacrificing your hobby, your physical fitness, your relationships.
And you don't respect boundaries.
Right. When you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. So you got to figure out again, go back to your mindset. What is it that I want to get done in what
Yeah,
time, right? Today I want to be at my kid's baseball game. I want to take my wife out to dinner. I want to get this thing done in my work, and things that don't fit in that need to go somewhere else. Now, you do need to have some white space in your schedule, because
Yeah.
things will happen. You
Yeah.
can't, that goes back to
Yeah.
having, I think it was your second question about being so detailed that you feel
Yeah.
like it's just, it's
And I
overwhelming.
believe that you should have thinking time rather
Yes.
than you're doing tasks. You know, you were saying you like to think long term. You know,
Yes.
you're not just thinking about the next 24 hours. Where does your nonprofit want to be next month, next year?
Mhm.
You need thinking time.
Yeah. Yeah. Who is it that, which foundation potentially could give us money? Which organization, which
Mhm.
people could, how do I have that conversation with them?
Yeah.
What is the reason that they would give us money? Your book, I used to have it right here. Yeah, I could probably reach real quick. Your book talks very clearly about people who have an interest in your company, who have the capability to give, right, and the propensity to give.
CIA, we call that.
CIA, yeah. I may not have gotten it perfectly
Capacity,
right.
inclination, and access.
Yeah. So
Hey, what do you
thinking
think
through who
about,
has that.
Dawn? What do you think about working from eating your lunch during, you know, at your desk to make up lost time?
Yeah, been there, done that. Terrible idea.
Why?
And here's why. Your mind needs the break from work to process things kind of in the background. It's kind of like a computer, right? We talk about there's processing stuff up front, but there's always things processing in the background. You know, part of the reason you need a good night's sleep is your brain will actually process things at night. Have you ever walked on a restroom break or walked down to grab a snack and you're struggling with something? And
Yeah.
all of a sudden you get down and you buy something. It's not the act of buying something, but it's the act that takes you 3 to 5 minutes. And all of a sudden things kind of come in place.
Gotcha.
Oh yeah, that's what I need to do. And you go back and you're more productive. I found if I take a 5-minute break every hour and just kind of take it, like when I'm working at home and I walk outside and I'm thinking about, am I working on the right priority thing? I'm
And
struggling with
also,
that
by the
piece.
way,
What's
it's
happening?
healthy. It's
It's
healthy.
healthy.
You know, you
Mhm.
shouldn't be at your seat for 8 straight hours.
That's right.
Ergonomically, it's going to be bad for you and bad for your employer.
That's right. That's right. So the brain needs that time, and you're actually much more productive when you do that. I find when I come back, I'm kind of rejuvenated, and I can actually do better. And again, we're about relationships. If you sit
Yeah.
at your desk all day, when I was on a project again at Oak Ridge, Tennessee, we would make it purposefully to go down to the cafeteria and have lunch together and get to know each other, because we were working different project
Mm,
pieces together. We were trying to save $3 billion on a
mm,
$20 billion contract. That was our task. And
mm.
if we didn't know what was happening around the different areas and who was doing it and how they're doing, we would have not been successful.
Hey, what do you think of the practice? I think it's called eating a frog. There's something that you dread doing, so do it first in the day.
Yeah.
What do you think
Yeah.
of that practice?
So I'm going to give you two sides of it. One is
Yeah.
it has a lot of merit. And if you're the person that will procrastinate and put that tough task off till later in the day, then hope that that you don't have to get it done. Maybe you can do it tomorrow and you keep putting it off, then putting that tough task first thing and getting in the mental mindset to do it is a good thing. But at the flip side of that is, if it's not one of your top priorities, why are you spending the best part of your day doing that, maybe number
Yeah.
3 or 4 priority?
Again,
So it all
it's your
depends
priority
against,
management, right?
yeah, it's about who you are, how you best use your time, how do you get through those tasks? And that's where self-awareness is so important. How do I process things? How do I attack things? How can I stay on target?
Yeah.
You know, if you put your toughest task at 1 o'clock after lunch and you're falling asleep,
Yeah.
not going to get done. You got to put things in that 1 to 3 o'clock time after lunch, like phone calls, right? Things that are going to be interactive.
Do you think people you learn when you're the most productive? It might be someone at 8 o'clock. Others might be very productive from 3 to 5 p.m. That
Yes.
everyone should know their own kind of
Mhm.
mental and physical rhythm.
Yes. There's a very good book out there, and all of a sudden I can't think about the author's name. I'll have to think about it, but he wrote a book about that, and based upon your rhythm, you know, are you an early bird or
Yeah.
a more late afternoon person? And you definitely need to know that, because you need
Yeah.
to put your best time on the toughest task.
Yeah.
There's a quote, I think by George Bernard Shaw, that says 2% of the people think, 3% think they think, and 95% would rather die than think.
Yeah.
But it's really kind of getting to is we don't actively use our thinking mind,
Yeah.
but very small part of the day. Usually we're just doing the same thing. We drive to work the same way. We walk to hallways the same way. We go to lunch the same way. We go to the gym the same time. We do the same exercises at the gym. So we don't literally engage the deepest part of our thinking, but a small
Yeah.
part. And if you're going to take a toughest task, which is maybe that frog, and my best time is 8 to 9 in the morning, then I need to put that task there.
Yeah.
Or the most important one, because that probably is when I can also avoid distractions.
Yeah. Okay, there's a tough one, I think. Say you're a mid-level employee. There are people under you, but there are a heck of a lot of people above you in the organization. What are diplomatic ways to say, no, not now, later?
Yeah, I had this situation once, and it was a positive and a negative. When the boss came down and he kept piling things on me, and
That's what bosses do.
that's right. And I finally got to the point where at one point I had like 5 things, and there was just no way I could get them done. And I looked at him, I said diplomatically, "Sir, I appreciate that, and I can take that task on. But the question is, where does it fit within the priority of the other things you've already given me? Because you've got 5 other things you want on Friday. If I add this one, there's no way I'm going to get there. I'm going to be working nights to get there. I got other things that I need to be doing. So help me with my priority." And he now all of a sudden noticed, oh, I've loaded too much things on Don. I'm going to take this
And you
give it
should
to somebody
be
else.
that you're in this together.
Right. Yeah. He should want me to be successful. He should want the best product at the end of the week. So again, it was communication. Communication. John Maxwell has a book that's used to be Real Success. Now it's Clear. And C is communication. It's one of the number one things that leaders have to do. And everybody's a leader. So we all have to really work on communication.
Yeah. Hey, Jim's a good employee. And guess what? It's coming to the end of the week and 2 urgent priorities. There's no way I can accomplish both. What do I do?
I guess 2 things, first is reach back to your boss. Let them know there's a problem here, and see if he's got any existence that for help, because he may have an idea that can help you cut through what you need to do to get that thing done. He may be able to realign somebody else to help you to get that piece done. If that's not possible, maybe they don't do that or they're not around, is reach out to your peers. I mean, part of the reason of having a peer network and having the relationships, and like you said, being in this together, is when you see other people struggling, you offer to help them. So that when law of reciprocity, right? When they see you struggling, or when you go talk to them, they'll help you out. So it's really about, all for what kind of 3 musketeers, all for one and one for all, right? We all work together to get this done. And you can't, we don't succeed by doing things by ourselves. We succeed as teams.
This has been a great discussion. We got a little time left, but I have 2 more questions before we look to the audience.
Okay.
What do you think of the use of do not disturb signs? Be they physical or be they digital or, some other format?
I definitely agree with them in the right time and place.
Okay, which is?
When you come down to you're time pressed and you got to get stuff done, and you don't want to have that conversation with time wasters coming by, and you just need to stay on task, because there's studies that say if you get off task, it takes you 20 minutes to get back on task. So you've got to stay on task. So closing the door, holding all calls, having a secretary, kind of the gatekeeper, whatever it is, to stop people from coming in is a necessary thing. But the problem is if you overuse it, it creates a problem. Had a gentleman again in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, great individual, but as soon as he walked in the morning, he closed his door. The door stayed closed all day unless he came out and asked for something, and he went back in and closed his door. So everybody just took the mental perception that he didn't want to be bothered. There was nothing there that was that important that we could bother him. And guess what? People didn't go to him. They didn't talk to him.
Yeah.
And the bad part was when he went to lunch, he went by himself. He didn't come to the cafeteria with the rest of the group. So he created this separation from
Yeah.
him, from himself to the team. And it's actually kind of people made fun of him, but also they didn't really work together with him very often. And as peers, we weren't working together. So it has a negative connotation, negative result if you do it too often.
Yeah. Don, you're doing a superb job of managing time. I think I have one last question for you, then we'll check on the audience, or we might go to our next priority. But my last question is, how can you tell the difference between Jim, who uses priority management, and Jim, who ignores priority management? How are you going to tell the difference between those two Jims?
Yeah, I think you see it in how they are, their attitude, their demeanor. I think people that are using time management, priority management, and they're getting things done in the right manner, they have a whole lot lower stress. They're a whole lot more fun to be around. They're willing to have conversations with people. They get to know their people, versus the individual who's just constantly overloaded. They can't get things done on time. They're always
And by
in
the
high
way,
stress.
that's very unhealthy.
It
That's
is.
an unhealthy employee that might be missing a lot of time.
That's right. And that's
By the
why
way,
we as leaders need to identify them and work with them to help them through that.
Yeah. John Largent, can you put up Don Gleason's contact information on the screen? And also, are there any questions in our audience? We have a couple of minutes left. If not, by the way, I think Don's been a very consistent member of our learning community on executive or leadership coaching, or particularly time management. Don, did I hear you right? You're giving permission to our audience that they can email you at that address, or they can call you at that cell number, and you can have an introductory consultation with Don Gleason. By the way, Don, this has been a magnificently productive and informative hour. I want to thank you. I mean, I feel like I know now a lot more than I used to know. And you put a very refreshing face on priority management, not time management, priority. So I got to warn you, you know what happens when you do a great job in this webinar?
You get called back.
You're right. You were going to call you back. Okay. That's about to be my time management. But I also want to thank our audience. Our learning community is made up of many different nonprofit employees and volunteers. And the work you do to improve the lot of others is so essential. We thank you for the work you do, because literally, like the military transition roundtable, you touch, improve, and save more lives. So thank you. And we'll be back 2 Wednesdays from now. Again, Don, this has been really a great hour. Thank you for making the conversation so lively. And John Largent, our producer from day one, thank you. Don, this was great. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate being a part of this community. The
Thank you.
nonprofits
And
are
John,
doing such excellent work in this community. It's so great to be tied together with them. And if this helps anyone manage that a little bit better, that's a win-win.
Very fruitful. Remember, Don welcomes. He gave you his email and his phone if you'd like to have an introductory consultation. John Largent, thank you. And we'll see you 2 weeks from now on Wednesday, November 9th.